Good morning, dear participants. I am Dilafro'z Xodjayeva, and today we'll have lecture 1, what is assessment and types of assessment. So this lecture is devoted to identifying the term assessment and all types of assessment. The lecture consists of 2 parts, and the first part will speak about assessment itself, and in the second part, we'll speak about types of assessment. So here we've got several keywords. You can see them on the screen. And before starting the lecture, I would like to ask you several questions. And what do you think assessment is? How do you understand this term? The second question, why do we need assessment? The third question, is it teaching or grading? What do you think? And now just think that you were a student, your student being Tyres, and think about 2 cases. The first case is when you experience the worst practice of assessment, and the second one is the worst. So 2 cases. Can you share these experiences? And now, there are 4 terms which are closely connected with our main topic, assessment. And these are assessment, testing, evaluating, and measurement. Try to define all these 4 terms and try to think about difference between these 4 terms. What is the difference? And now, what's assessment? Assessment is an ongoing process that encompasses a much wider domain. Whenever a student responds to a question, offers a comment, or tries out a new word or structure, the teacher subconsciously makes an assessment of the student's performance. Teachers gather information by giving tests, conducting interviews, and monitoring behavior. And the assessment should be carefully prepared beforehand. It should be carefully administered to ensure its reliability and validity. In other words, an assessment must provide consistent results, and it must measure what it claims to measure. The second term is measurement. So what is measurement? So this word, as it applies to education, is not substantially different from when it is used in any other field. It simply means determining the attributes or dimensions of an object, skill or knowledge. We use common objects in the physical world to measure, such as tape measures, scales, and meters. These measurement tools are held to standards and can be used to obtain reliable results. When used properly, they accurately gather data for educators and administrators. Some standard measurements in education are raw scores, percentile range, and standard scores. The next term is evaluation. In education, evaluation is a process of using the measurements gathered in the assessments. Teachers use this information to judge the relationship between what was intended by the instruction and what was learned. They evaluate the information gathered to determine what students know and understand, how far they have progressed and how fast, and how their scores and progress compare to those of other students. And the next term is test. A test is a method of measuring a person's ability or knowledge in a given domain, with an emphasis on the concepts of method and measuring. Tests are instruments that are carefully designed and that have identifiable scoring rubrics. Tests are prepared administrative procedures that occupy identifiable time periods in a curriculum when learners master all their faculties to offer peak performance knowing that the responses are being measured and evaluated. Well, assessment, as we have mentioned above, this is a process, and it contains a set of 4 components. These 4 components or stages are planning, doing, checking, and acting. What's planning? Well, what do I want my students to learn? So we ask this question to ourselves when we start planning our course. And this stage includes the first fundamental component of an assessment, this formulating statements of intended learning outcomes. What should be learning outcomes of the students of my course? So we should answer to this question at the very beginning planning stage. Then the second stage is doing. So where we have to answer the question, how do I teach effectively? And this stage includes the second and third fundamental components. That's developing or selecting assessment measures and creating experiences leading to our formulated outcomes. The next stage is checking stage. So here we have to answer the question, are my outcomes being met? And this stage involves evaluation of assessment data, so which is part of the 4th component. And the 4th stage is, how do I use what I have learned? This is acting stage. And this stage involves reinforcing successful practices and making revisions to enhance student learning, which is again part of the 4th component. And now we'll move to the second part of the lecture, which is about types of assessment. There is a wealth of different formats and types of assessment you could use. To decide what type of assessment to implement, you first need to make sure that the assessment is valid and relevant. And now here we'll have types of assessment. So they are formative assessment, summative assessment, work integrated assessment, diagnostic assessment, dynamic assessment, criterion-referenced assessment, student self-assessment, and many other ways. Well, what's formative assessment? So this is an essential part of teaching and learning. It doesn't add to the final marks given for the unit. Instead, it puts into learning through given advice. Also, it points out what's good about the work and what's not. Similarly, it also affects what the students and teacher will plan in the future for learning. So that's formative assessment. We can say that this is usually done during the ongoing process. The next type, so here we've got examples of formative assessment. So in class or online quizzes can be used for formative assessment, homework tasks discussed in seminars, peer feedback activities can be used, or submitting a blog post for feedback in advance of a longer piece of summative reflective writing. So different kind of problem-solving classes can be organized for formative assessment, and of course, practice exams can be used. And the next type is summative assessment. It shows the amount of learner success in meeting the assessment. Also, it contributes to the final marks given for the unit. These are conducted at the end of the unit. In addition, it provides data for selection for the next level. The logic and dependability of summative assessment are of great importance. It can also provide information that has formative value. And here we've got some examples which we can use or which could be used for summative assessment. So these are written exams, multiple choice question exams, open book exams, scene exams, essay submissions, dissertations, digital assets like video, audio, website, and of course, portfolios. And the next type of assessment is work integrated assessment. This type of assessment is where the tasks and situations are closely associated with what you experience. It helps to develop student skills and capabilities along with educational development. Also, this helps and supports educational staff to design genuine assessments. It's designed according to the need of the teacher. So that's integrated assessment. And now the next type is diagnostic assessment. This is just like formative assessment, is intended to improve learners' knowledge. Besides, it looks backward rather than looking forward. It reviews what the learner knows and difficulties that they are facing in learning. Not diagnosing these difficulties could limit their participation in learning. Often, it is used when a problem arises or before it. The next type is dynamic assessment, which measures what students can achieve when teaches about unfamiliar topic or field. An example can be teaching students Spanish for a short while. It helps to see how students who don't have any prior knowledge adapt it. It can be helpful to review the potential for students who have a mainly underprivileged backdrop. Frequently, it's used in advance of the main body of teaching. The next type is Criterion-referenced Assessment. So the performance of every student is judged by a specific principle. It should be strictly seen that other students' performance shouldn't be taken into account. In addition, the teacher should avoid normative thinking because it can affect judgment. Apart from that, the teacher should assure reliability and validity of assessment. And the next type is student self-assessment. Well, self-assessment helps students to develop independence and ownership of their learning, which builds confidence and a sense of their strengths and areas for growth. That self-awareness is even more important in a hybrid model, where students don't have as many opportunities to informally check in with their teacher and get quick feedback. Well, this was generally all about assessment and types of assessment. So here we've got several questions for self-assessment. What's assessment? What types of assessment do you know? What is formative assessment? What's summative assessment? And what's the difference between summative and formative assessment? So here we've got the list of recommended literature and websites. So there are different websites where you can watch videos connected with that topic. Well, thank you for your attention. This is the end of the lecture.